Jesse Minter spoke at the NFL Annual League meeting, and he had a lot to say on the state of the Baltimore Ravens and, of course, Lamar Jackson.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome in to the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and now the #1 sports podcast network. On today's show, Jesse Minter spoke at the NFL Annual League meeting, and he had a bunch to say. So we'll dive into some of it here. In the second part of the show, we're going to talk about Jesse Minter's thoughts on the offensive line and just kind of where they stand and where they could stand heading into the 2026 season. But in the first part of the show, there's been a lot of topics of conversation about it, and it kind of, I guess, got revived here over the course of the last couple of days, or even just today, of Lamar Jackson and the offseason program conversation. Will he be there? Will he not be there? So Jesse Minter talked about that a little bit as well, and whereas he was actually asked multiple different questions on it and kind of took the same stance on it the whole way, which I thought was good, but didn't necessarily commit one way or the other, which I think is smart in the whole situation, because who knows if Lamar is going to show up at this point. But what Jesse Minter did have to say about it is, yes, he was first asked just about the entire situation surrounding it, about just like, what's it been like with Lamar as the offseason program gets pointed towards and the dialogue about that. And just kind of just ask where things stand on it, and if he gets a sense that Lamar will be there for some of the offseason. And Jesse Minter said, quote, "I think we're excited about the offseason program. I know Lamar is excited. I think he's excited about some of the changes. We've had a lot of good connection points, but the offseason program is voluntary, and we're excited to get a chance to work with all the guys, whoever wants to show up. I feel confident that a lot of guys will be there." And then again, like I've said this before, it's our job to make it an environment and an opportunity for them to really feel like they're getting a lot out of it. And so I'm excited about that process, the way the staff has put in the work to be ready to make it a worthwhile offseason program. So I just look forward to getting all the guys there. So again, no committal to one way or the other for Lamar, but I do think that it is important for not just Lamar, but for everybody to be at the offseason workouts and the offseason program this year for the Ravens. And again, like, it's not about singling out Lamar. I feel like that's what this has turned into, and it all started really, I think, with, Declan Doyle having essentially setting the expectation, but Declan Doyle never called out Lamar by name, but everybody just kind of assumed Declan Doyle's answer was about Lamar when Declan Doyle never said Lamar. But again, with Lamar Jackson, we know that sometimes he shows up and then leaves and all this other stuff, and people, I think, just have either just, it's a common misconception, or people just forget that Lamar hasn't skipped every offseason program in existence since he's become, starting quarterback, MVP, whatever you want to call it. Like, he'll show up, and yeah, sometimes he'll show up for a day and then leave, or a week and then leave, or whatever it may be. But I think people just assume, the way people talk about Lamar, he's never shown up, but that's not the case. Now, I do think this year he needs to show up, and everybody else, all the big veteran leaders have to show up. Obviously, Lamar's your quarterback. He's your big time player. He's your biggest star. So of course, I think that he and the other veteran leaders need to set an example. But this whole thing about singling out Lamar, I'm not saying Jesse Minter is doing that. I'm not saying that's what I thought Jesse Minter's answer was very good in the fact that, again, he felt confident that a lot of guys will be there, and he wants a chance to work with all of the guys. So there was not a singling out in Jesse Minter's answer either. Yes, he was asked about Lamar, but this year it's of the utmost importance. Now, is it going to define whether they win or lose a Super Bowl? Are we going to look back on the season if they don't win the Super Bowl and be like, man, Lamar wasn't there for that one day of OTAs, or, Roquan Smith didn't show up for that? No, I don't think so. But we have to be real about it too, with a new system, new coaching staff in place, and a lot of new faces, right? A lot of guys left in free agency. We're bringing them some new players too. You need to, in my opinion, have the urgency as a team, right? As a roster, to be in there working, building relationships, and you can get a head start on that. I think any head start you can get is important. If there wasn't a head start, I think that they'd get there, right? But what's been the problem with the Ravens, particularly over the last 2 seasons? Slow starts. You can't have that happen this year. And again, the Ravens are in a very interesting spot where obviously Jesse Minter is a first-time head coach. There's going to be a bit of a trial and error here for Jesse Minter. Again, no one's perfect when they first start out, especially first-time head coaches or first-time defensive coordinators, first time, like all that. Remember, Mike McDonald wasn't perfect when he first started out, right? We talk about it. I mentioned this last week, the Dolphins game that, again, shall not be talked about because it was bad. But, there's always a learning process and a learning experience. So that to me is big. But at the same time, you also can't rush things. And that's something I thought that Jesse Minter hit on, which I thought was important because there was a question asked to Jesse about all three phases being different. And how he says essentially was asked how important it is that you guys are able to get players to learn things quickly so you can get to the next thing. And how do you go about doing that? And Jesse Minter kind of pushed back a little bit and said, he said, quote, I think you have to be careful, honestly. I think the most important thing is creating the foundation of each of the three phases first. So the way that the phase of the offseason program works, in my mind, it gives you that opportunity to build a foundation through the first couple phases before you're really out there doing a lot of reps. So we have to be really cognizant of not trying to go too fast and making sure that they understand the foundational pieces, the foundational structures that we operate. So yes, I'm stoked about the process. And I think this is a really good answer and a really great mindset to have for Minter and for the organization. It'll probably be really tempting to lay out everything you have to do in front of you and be like, man, this is a long list of things. And so there might be a little pressure to be like, man, if we don't get all this stuff down by this date or this date or this date, you got to move on. Okay, you got it. We're going. But if guys don't really get it, you get into game action and it could be the difference between a win or a loss. So this is big because sometimes I think teams do rush things of new system, new coaches, new players, and you're trying to figure everything out really quickly and getting everyone up to speed on everything because there's probably so much you have to do from both short-term and long-term things you have to learn, from detailed stuff to very general things for the new system. But to me, that's why it's important for everybody to be there, because if you're trying to be competitive, I think any head start you can get is a huge advantage for you because, you're starting at that point. And then when you get to the next big step and the next big gathering of the offseason program, you've already had some time to work on those initial things and then you can move into the next phase. So for these veteran leaders, I do think it's very important for them to be there. Again, it is voluntary. So as I've maintained for my entire time hosting this show, I will not bash anyone for not being there. Will it be disappointing if some veteran leaders are not there? Sure, absolutely. And we can talk about that. But at the end of the day, it is up to the players on what they want to do. But I think that this year in particular, outside of previous years, even when the Ravens were bringing in new defensive coordinators, new offensive coordinators, this is completely different, right? This is the entire system, the head coach, everybody. So I think if you're Lamar, if you're Roquan, if you're Kyle Hamilton, if you're Derrick Henry, et cetera, I think it'd go a long way if they were there. And, maybe if they leave on the last day or something, or they don't show up for the last day or something like that. Okay. You can live with that. But ideally you get 100% participation the whole way through. How realistic is that? I don't know. But, Jesse was asked about it a couple of times. Even the last question he was asked about it. And he was asked if he would say that's still up in the air in terms of Lamar Jackson's participation. And he said, quote, I think Lamar's really excited about what we have going on. I think he's excited about the opportunities in the offseason program. And again, we'll see on April 6th. We'll see who all walks in the door. So again, I don't know if there's been any communication between Jesse Minter and some of the guys about plans or whatnot, but we'll see. It's coming up quickly. We're going to know. So I'm excited to talk about that when it does happen. Coming up though, in the second part of the show, we will dive into Jesse Minter talking about the Ravens offensive line situation, where they stand now and where they could be by the time the 2026 season starts. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty coming up on the show. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets changes the game. It's people moving the action. So when momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play by play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives LLC, a registered futures commission, merchant, and swap firm. Moving along, Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Tuesday PM edition of the show. Thanks so much for being here and making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. We have 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens content and coverage for you twice per day, Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern time, as well as bonus episodes, instant reaction shows, watch-alongs. We have the squad show. We also have the Everydayer Club, where you get some extra add-on content like ad-free episodes, access to a Discord server, one-on-one text conversation with me, as well as so many other cool things. So if you want to check that out, links in the description down below, as well as on the Locked On Ravens page on the Locked On website. We're talking about Jesse Minter and what he had to say during the NFL Annual League meeting, and he had a lot to talk about in terms of the team itself, and we just obviously talked about what he had to say about Lamar Jackson and the whole offseason program talk situation thing. But he also talked about the offensive line. He was asked a question about it, and I thought his answer was really interesting, and honestly something that is probably going to end up being what happens, right? So he was asked a question about the offensive line being a big point of contention last season. And in the question, it was said that it's a long way away with decisions and things like that. But how do you view what you guys will do there, particularly at center and the two guards? And so Jesse Minter obviously talked about John Simpson and said, quote, "We added John Simpson, and I think there's a lot of time between now and September to continue to add pieces. There are a multitude of ways you can still add pieces with free agency and the draft, obviously." And he said, quote, "I know Ozzie always said it's a long time between now and the early part of September when you're playing. And so I'm super confident in the group that we have in place right now. I'm super confident that those guys will work really hard this offseason. They'll put together a good offensive line, and that we'll continue to add pieces throughout the roster that we feel will help us become the best team we can be." He also talked actually a little bit about Emory Jones, which I thought was really cool. He said, quote, "I'm excited about him. I think he came on late in the year, did some good things. He was very highly thought of in the draft process, even though he was coming off the injury. And so, again, I'm excited for him just to have the opportunity to be healthy, go into an offseason, really learn a new offense and compete for jobs. I'm very excited about his future." So I think Jesse Minter's assessment of this is obviously correct, where the Ravens have added John Simpson, but they haven't added enough yet, in my opinion. That's not what Jesse said, but he essentially is saying, hey, there's still opportunities for us to add. And so when you look at the draft process and kind of how things are going to play out here, the Ravens have the 14th pick, and even if they don't want to spend the 14th pick on an offensive lineman when it comes down to draft night, you're going to have other opportunities to add 1, 2, maybe 3 offensive linemen to your roster. And there are still a couple of other guys that maybe could sign after the draft, because right now, your starting offensive line would be Ronnie Stanley, John Simpson, either Corey Bullock or Danny Pinter, Emory Jones probably at right guard, and then Roger Rosengarten. And so he was also asked about the center position, and just being like, the question that he was asked was, do you view yourself as having a starting center on the roster, and who would that guy be right here? And he said that the depth charts right now are pretty irrelevant, and that they're excited about the couple of guys that they've added and some of the guys on the roster. But Minter said that they're going to let that stuff kind of sort itself out through competition all the way into training camp. And again, he said the real competition will be training camp, and I'm sure by then we'll have even more pieces added in to that competition. So the Ravens have already added 3 guys, but no way should they be done. And obviously these comments, they're not going to be done. I would anticipate the Ravens use 2 of their first 6 picks on offensive linemen at the max. I could even see a situation where they do it with 2 of their first 3. But where that ends up happening is going to depend on how the draft board falls. And then, for example, maybe after the draft, you bring in a vet like Kevin Zeitler. And it just depends, right? Because if you take a guard at 14 and it's Venga Ioane is going to probably start for you. In fact, he has to start for you, because you're not going to take a guy at 14 and not play him. So Ioane starts for you, and then, do you need Zeitler? I mean, it's a backup option, sure, but is that what Zeitler's looking for? Right now, is his career kind of reaches the end stages. We'll see. At the center position, if a Spencer Fano falls to them, you can kick inside. Well, and there's your center option. But if you don't have a guard, feel comfortable in a guard to play there that you drafted, is it Emory Jones, or do you bring in competition? So you could also maybe even see a trade, right? I don't know. Every possibility is on the table here. But I think, again, this is the mindset that is completely fine for me, where obviously there are going to be more additions, but the Ravens feel confident. Again, Baltimore's added depth pieces right now. They added Simpson as a starter. You're paying him $10 million per season. So, I mean, he's going to start. It's very expensive for a backup, right? So Simpson will be your left guard, in my opinion. And then you just really have to figure out the center in the right guard spot. And right now, could you skate by with what you had, assuming everything goes right? Sure, but that's not the goal here, right? Because again, right now, the offensive line is worse than what it was last year. And that's because, yes, you have upgraded. Anything would be an upgrade, honestly, from what you got last year from Andrew Voorhees and Daniel Falele. But you don't want to just have those like very small upgrades and then an absolute crater at center because Linderbaum's one of the best centers in the league and he is now gone. So if you want to improve your offensive line, I think you have to take at least one more big swing here, whether that is with pick 14 or maybe a trade that people aren't anticipating. And we'll just see how the rest of the offseason works. But Jesse Minter is correct, right? There's a lot of time between here on March 31st and the start of September when these guys will play. And I am excited to see how everything unfolds for them because I think if you can protect your quarterback, if you can protect Lamar Jackson, give him the time to be Lamar Jackson, throwing that football, it's going to be a much better season for the Ravens. But if you fail to do that and you kind of take some risks again and it doesn't really work for you, that I think we have to have some deeper conversations about roster construction on this team, just how everything goes there. So a lot of stuff from Jesse Minter, still so much to dive into over the course of the rest of the week with that, because I want to, again, spend the right amount of time on everything he talked about. So we'll dive into so much more here over the course of the rest of the week on Locked On Ravens. That's all I have for you here today, though, on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in to the show. Otherwise, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button in video form and follow along and subscribe in audio form for 5 days a week, plus more of daily Ravens coverage and content. Coming up, we will be back with our 6 a.m. episode tomorrow, so be sure to stay tuned, and I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.